Joining us now to discuss gun violence and growing calls for gun control measures is Irvin Waller. He's an author of Science and Secrets of Ending Violent Crime and Professor Emeritus of Criminology at the University of Ottawa. Professor, welcome to the program. Canada's Minister of Emergency Preparedness says in Canada, gun ownership is a privilege, not a right. Would you say this, in fact, is what differentiates Canada and the United States when it comes to gun control measures?
Yes, absolutely. So Canada, since the 1970s, has had, you have to have a license to be able to buy any sort of gun, and like a long gun, and you need an additional permission to be able to own a handgun. And the legislation that was announced yesterday is an effective ban on assault weapons and a freezing of those who already have a license to own a handgun. It's also accompanied by efforts to try and restrict the smuggling of handguns from the United States, which is the main reason why we have, by US standards, very low rates, but by Canadian standards, high rates of handgun violence in some of our cities.
So why, we've discussed this so many times. Many opponents of gun control in this country repeatedly point to the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which protects the right to keep and bear arms. I'm just curious how this is all viewed in Canada from the Canadian perspective when they look at the Americans. Do they think we've just completely lost our minds?
Yes, is the answer to that question. When you see the number of mass shootings, school shootings, shootings in churches, in synagogues, and mosques that happen in the United States, we find this unbelievable. There is a lobby here for sports and hunters to be able to keep guns. They were quite outspoken on the banning of AR-15s, and they are hesitant about this freezing of the number of people with licenses for handguns. In Canada, you are not allowed to get a license to or any level of certificate for your self-protection. And we look down at the United States and say, oh, this is the country that has the highest incarceration rate anywhere in the world, the most punitive sanctions possible for particularly for violence and for gun violence. And we cannot believe that Americans need to buy more guns to protect themselves. In Canada, if you, for instance, compare Toronto and Chicago, two cities of the same size, Chicago has 2.5 times the number of police of Toronto, and it has an incarceration rate, that's the number of people in prison per 100,000, about 6 times that of Ontario.
Professor Waller, why is that in this country? Why are we dealing with an obsession with gun rights and a gun culture? There is absolutely no unity, as we heard in Jim Spelsman's piece there, a reporter. This country is deeply divided. Can anything change here?
Well, the United States did have an assault weapon ban for 10 years, so maybe it's possible for that to recur. But the vast majority of people who are killed with guns in the United States are actually not killed in these spectacular school shootings. They're killed on in the ghettos of very rich cities, like Chicago. So Chicago has 800 murders a year. Toronto, that has a much wider social safety net, only has 80. And this has a lot to do with governments that don't really care about saving lives, and who think that incarcerating is somehow going to protect people.
We're running out of time, but very quickly, how much of this, what's happening in this country, has to do with politicians being in the back pockets of the National Rifle Association, or NRA?
Well, I think it's very clear that the Republicans are in their primaries have to basically do what the NRA wants them to do. And so they're not going to move away from what the NRA wants. But the NRA has been in difficulty, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens this time around. In Canada, there is a sportsman group arguing for sportsmen to be able to use rifles and handguns, but under very strict laws.
Right.
But I think if you look at the United States, well, if you look at Mexico, Mexico basically trades drugs for guns. In Canada, we're fortunate to have social policies that mean that the demand for handguns, for whatever reason, to protect their drug retailing, is at the moment under control.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. We certainly appreciate your take on this. Professor Irvin Waller, thank you.